Hi there. This is Glenn Simpson from Glenn Simpson's Comics. And I've collected comics for over 40 years. And normally I show off my collection one box at a time. But today, I have two things I normally do on Thursday nights, and neither one of them were going to happen this week. So I thought, you know what? This might be a good time to go live again and give it a shot and see how it goes. I'm still a small channel, so not sure what the attendance will be, but we're going to give it a shot here. So um, hope that you'll be sure to enter the chat. Let me make sure that I can see the chat properly here. And we'll just go right along here. I've got a little bit of an agenda, but if you have any questions or anything that you want to throw at me, be sure to throw that at me. We're playing this kind of fast and loose. So again, want to welcome you to the stream. This is a comic book stream, so I thought one of the things that we would do was we would take a look at some comics, right? And I thought that we might look at some of the absolute books. And the reason why is I've been doing my collection videos where I show you the highlights of each of the boxes in my collection for about a year now, really, April of last year. And so box number one, which, has the absolute stuff in it, alphabetically speaking, that was a year ago, and there's been a lot of absolute books since then. So figured that would be a good thing where there's some stuff that maybe you folks haven't seen and stuff. So let's take a look. Now, I don't have it all, where we can look down on them like I normally do in most of my videos. So we're just going to kind of do it the way a lot of people do, or I'm just going to hold it up. So here we go. The entirety that I have of all of the absolute DC books. Not really any variant covers. I'm more of a cover A kind of guy, especially with DC. They charge extra, for the cardstock covers, and so that's just a rule I have. I'll buy a variant if it's going to be the same price as the regular A cover, but not if I'm going to be paying extra. It has to be like one of my favorite artists or something like that for me to buy that cardstock cover. So here we go. We're gonna go through the whole thing. We got nothing but time here, so let's go. So we're gonna start with the biggie, and let me get my bearings on the best way. Okay, there we go. We got Absolute Batman number 1 right there, and it's protective top loader because this is a big boy book among big boy books. Unfortunately, my copy has a tiny little fingerprint on it, and that I'm not too happy about, but that doesn't stop it from actually being a fairly pricey book. So that's Absolute Batman 1. And these are done kind of like my normal videos, like the books that are worth a little more, they're individually packaged. The books that are maybe not worth so much, they're in little packs, and we'll just look at the first one and the back one on each of those. Let's see. So we've got number 2 right there. So the absolute, especially Absolute Batman, and I'll try to talk and show at the same time, is it kind of reminds me of the Tangent series, which if you're familiar with those, it's where the names are the same, but the situation is different. And we've got, and sometimes this reminds me, this is number 4, by the way. That's what it reminds me of. It's like you've got Bruce Wayne, and you've got Alfred, and you've got, Penguin, and you've got Killer Croc and all that, but everything else, the name's the same, but everything, so much else is different. There we go. That was number 5. I should do that first. I should announce what it is first and then do it. We've got number 6 right there. I actually have a box on the way in the mail from Discount Comic Book Service, so The absolute latest issues are not necessarily in here. We got issue 7 there. Got issue 8 right there. Hope it's I'm looking at myself in the other screen. Looks like I'm coming across pretty bright. I hate glare. I hate glare in comic book YouTube things. So I've been really working to get my lighting where that's not the case. All right, we got gargantuan, ridiculous Bane in number 9 there. We've got number 10, another pricey book here. Gotta avoid that monitor glare there. Can't do it. The top loaders are really reflective. Let's see. We've got issue 11. I swear we'll get to some, we'll skip some when we get to other characters. We got issue 12. He said, remembering that he just said 11. All right, here we go. So we've got issue 13. Now, I did go back through these just the other day, and I did sort of make sure that some of the cool covers actually do show on the outside, even if they're packaged. And then 15, right there. Absolute Joker, who is absolutely terrifying. There you go. And make sure that's... And we've got Absolute Batman 16, one of the crossovers with Absolute Wonder Woman. I thought it was really well done. They didn't fight each other. I can't remember. I don't think they fought each other first and then said, oh, figured it out and moved on. We've got, okay. So, wait. All right. So 18 right there. And that gets me caught up. With that, we've got Absolute Batman Annual, the infamous and Absolute Batman Annual. We've got the Absolute Batman Arc M special. Of course, they play on words with the art. What's in the normal universe is Arkham. It's Arc M here. We've got the Absolute Evil special with all of the various bad guys from all the Absolute books kind of getting together. All right, then we get to Absolute Flash. So this has been pretty neat. The first few issues were a little hard to follow, I admit, but then they I think somebody figured out that they were a little hard to follow and straightened it out a little bit. We've got a version of the Flash where Wally is the first one to get powers, but he still has sort of a Barry Allen mentor figure whom something happens to, and that's issue 4. And he, so we do get that flavor of, a Wally who takes over for Barry kind of thing. We've got, what is this, 5? Right there. Through 6, 7, 8. Absolute Flash. Like I say, my brand is let's show them all. And that's what we're doing. Issue 9. I'm not, most. Not all. Although, as I always say on my regular videos, if there's ever anything where you want me to open up a package, that was 9 and this is 12, and do every single issue, I'll make a video about it. I got nothing better to do. And number 13 of Absolute Flash. There. Now, let's go to Green Lantern. Green Lantern, it's got a lore, as the kids say. It's got this whole thing where, Abin Sur, instead of being that just being the name of an alien, Abin is like a title, and Sur is like a philosophy. And so you have these mixes of names and things. And I saw a really good post on Reddit. I wish I had like bookmarked it, because it was, somebody had sat down and like really like figured out what all of it means. But they really need a chart at the beginning of each issue to help us. Should be issue 5 there through 8 there. One of the things, I think the first few issues of this, they jumped around in time, and you can do that in a book. Like, this is one of my complaints about Tom King on like Batman and Batman Catwoman and stuff. I mean, you can do it, but it'd be great if you didn't. If you sort of told your story linearly. That's 9 through 12 right there. So that is Absolute Green Lantern. And let me fix my stack here. Stand by. All right. Here we go. So we've got Absolute Martian Manhunter. Now, for those who don't know, this is a very, very different concept. Instead of, in the regular universe, the Martian Manhunter is literally a guy from Mars who comes to Earth and has powers and does it. Here in Absolute Martian Manhunter, it's really unclear what he is, but he is some sort of mental organism, if you will. He's not literally a Martian. He's not literally green. He's like that's just kind of a form he takes. He exists in the mind of this guy, John Jones. And there's all kinds of, it's very lofty. It's very lofty, but a lot of people like it. I'm kind of 3 out of 5 on it. This is one of those, if I quit buying it and say, well, I'll pick it up in dollar bins later. That was 2. This always happens to me. So I say, well, I'll pick it up later. I'll get it, whatever. It's going to be in dollar bins, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll introduce some character who, winds up in a movie or something. And so the issue that I don't have, or one of the issues I don't have, will end up being, a $200 book or something. This is 4. And, so it's better for me to just suck it up. If I start it, I usually finish it. Series wise, issue 5 there. Like, I remember at one point I quit buying Wonder Woman. And no sooner did I quit, not long after I quit buying it, you got to that period where like Brian Boland was doing the covers like in the 90s. And it has cost me not too much, but more than I really cared to pay to go back and get those issues. Hey, we got 3 people here. It's a barnstormer. Almost 10% of my subscribers are here. Anyway, issue 7. We'll talk a little bit more about my subscriber count and stuff as I give you a channel update. That's 9, which brings us to the end of Martian Manhunter. And then, not finally, second to finally, we have Absolute Superman. We're going to go through, for those of you who are just joining, if you're just jumping on, I'm just showing off Absolute DC books. We're just looking at all the Absolute books here. We've got Absolute Superman number 1. This one's pretty good. It's kind of amazing. I don't know spoilers, but there was, a major change recently and how the kind of things configured. And I was a little surprised by that. Through 4. course, for those who are not familiar, this is a Superman who came to Earth like, I think he was like 13-ish, so he remembers Krypton. It's not the same as the classic baby sort of situation. 5 through 8. There. This is what we do on Glenn Simpson's comics. We look at all the comics, not just the keys. 9 right there. There we go. Through 12, with gargantuan Ra's al Ghul, who's just kind of a Superman foe in this version of things. 13 right there. It's kind of hard to see what's going on, but everything's on fire. Through, what is that, 16 with Absolute Hawkman. Nice to see at least some kind of Hawkman running around. Don't get enough Hawkman anymore. And then issue 17. There. All right. So then we're going to do Absolute Wonder Woman. So we've got issue 1 right there. Everybody, it's been a pretty good book. This is a pretty solid book. Oops. Got issue 2 there. Through what? Through 4. And I was just looking at myself over there. There's a delay. It freaked me out for a minute. Issue 5 right there. And then issue 6, which just went up, actually. That I was, like I said, I was reviewing them and seeing which ones needed to be moved into Mylar and all that. Ooh, bad glare. You get the point, though. And this was one that had jumped up, I guess, because of the cool cover there. 7 there. Through 9 there. We've got number 10, which has also gone up. I don't know what happened there. Not like keys. I would have marked them if they were like keys. And 11. And a little bundle here. We got 12. And through 15, another part of that Batman Wonder Woman crossover that they did. Pretty good. And whoop, they're sliding. Number 16 with the new Absolute Zatanna, who I hope doesn't turn out to be a bad person. So far, they're leaving it unclear. And what is that? 17, which finishes up the series except for the Absolute Wonder Woman annual number 1. So there you go. So, wanted to make sure we definitely showed some comics rather than me just sitting here yapping at you for, an hour or however long we stay here. Sometime, I spend a lot of time on Reddit and talk to people about comics on Reddit, answer questions, get into stupid internet fights with people. And sometimes, there are recurring questions that you see sometimes. And so I wanted to take a minute to talk about that. And one of them, or those kinds of questions, has to do with Crisis on Infinite Earths, the 1980s big DC Comics event. So before we talk about it, let's show it, shall we? So we've got issue number 1. Of course, this is so Crisis was a 12-issue maxi series published by DC Comics, written by Marv Wolfman, drawn by George Perez. It's Perez, not Perez, because the accent is on the first E, kind of like Lopez. And it basically has every single character in the DC universe, and showing up at some point or another. Even Amazing Man, and issue 2, and the goal. What ends up happening? So DC had a full, a whole bunch of different Earths in their multiverse, and they thought this was like confusing new readers. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I'm not gonna, not going to argue with they have the numbers, and so they decided to kind of reboot their universe such that there would only have ever been one Earth. And I say only have ever been, and that's going to get into the point of the question that I'm sort of answering here, that I find myself answering a good bit on Reddit. But anyway, before we finish, let's get all this. This is my Crisis on Infinite Earth 7, Death of Supergirl, George Perez autograph. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. We've got issue 8, Death of the Flash, Barry Allen, which is also kind of, keep in mind, Death of Barry Allen there. Let's see. Issue 9, kind of all of the villains get together and have, try to, kill all the heroes or whatever, take over. I don't know why I have a facsimile of that too. I don't know why I bought that, but anyway, back to the originals. These were all the originals, by the way, except for that one. Got an issue 11, the big battle right there. And then, no, wait, that was 10. Sorry. This is 11 right here. Blah, blah, blah. And then issue 12, the final battle and the resolution and the understanding of what has just happened with their multiverse. And so at the end of the book, there are 5 universes, and those 5 universes kind of collapse into one. That's a combination. So whereas in the before the crisis, you had Earth 1, and then you had Earth 2, and Earth 2 was where the 1940s heroes lived. Now in the new universe, the 1940s heroes just existed in the 1940s of this one universe you had, right? So, okay. That's Crisis. That's how it came. That's how it was originally published. So the Crisis goes by, and the questions that we get sometimes are things like, how could Wally West inherit the mantle of the Flash from Barry Allen if the universe started over after the crisis? Or, I don't know how they worded the question, but the insinuation was somebody thought that, okay, so you read that the Batman's post-crisis adventures were Batman Year One, and then the stuff that they published right after Batman Year One, and then he didn't understand how Batman Year Two could be, there could be stuff in between and all that stuff. So, for those who, so there's this fascinating concept of, what was the revised DC universe like? And so just to kind of run through it as I understand it. So in this post-crisis world, the history was rewritten all the way back to the Big Bang, if you will. So instead of at the Big Bang, multiple Earths springing up, we just had one Earth spring up. So then, time goes by, early history, Guardians of the Universe form the Green Lantern or whatever, all that, cosmic stuff that takes place before you ever kind of get around to Earth. And then you hit the 1940s and you have the Justice Society, but you don't have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman at the time. It was a little questionable about Green Arrow and Speedy, and technically you did not, but it just took a while for that to get straightened out. So those stories still kind of happened, but just a little differently, given that Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman weren't around, which is not that big a deal for Superman and Batman, because that was during the span when DC was like two different companies. And so Superman and Batman were owned by one company. And so they wouldn't always let the other company who was publishing Justice Society use them. So really they weren't around that much, but they were more around in stuff that was created after the fact. Like Batman was stuck into the new origin that the Justice Society originally got, but I digress. So you got the 1940s, blah, 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 some indeterminate amount of time. And then you get to, 10 years ago. And that is where the John Byrne Man of Steel happens. And that is where, regardless of like issue numbers or where these stories were published, that is where, Batman Year One happens. It's when, they revised Aquaman's origin, and that's kind of when that happens. And that's, when Barry Allen didn't really get a revised origin, but, that's roundabout where it would have happened. It still happened. And, Hal Jordan's new Emerald Dawn origin would have happened back then. And, I can't remember whatever John Ostrander, created for Martian Manhunter, that happened back then. So then this is probably the hardest thing for people who are just reading this stuff now, and out of order and weren't there at the time to understand, is that after that, you've got within the history of the characters, this like 10-year span where nobody really knows what happened for sure. Unless, if they would publish stories that, took place in the past, so you knew that was in there. So something like Batman Legend of the Dark Knight would happen, during that span. There was, in I think Action Comics 650, there was this little segment where Martian Manhunter reflects on the fact that Superman had helped out in this one Justice League adventure where they met the new gods, which means that, that story kind of happened at some point. But there's this whole period, let me make sure I get my notes out, where you didn't really know what happened, for sure. And so they were telling you what happened just kind of in flashback, but not necessarily in order. It wasn't like everything just totally rebooted. But during that 10-year span, you had like, all the sidekicks started. You would have, Black Canary get started. You had the JLA Year One story would have been set there. You had Green Arrow, Wonder Year. The Atom was kind of like the Flash. It's like he didn't really get a new origin. He just knew that it happened, during that span. Now Hawkman, Hawkman has a bit of a convoluted history, but just to keep it simple, we're just going to say that during that 10-year span, the original Hawkman came out of retirement and, joined the Justice League and all that stuff. And then sometime after that, the rest of the JSA comes out of retirement. The Teen Titans form, the satellite era of the Justice League. In theory, now they never really discussed this much, but in theory, so there's that point. It's what All-Star Comics 58, the first appearance of Power Girl. So in theory, at that point in the history, this chick named Power Girl would have just popped up, and she doesn't know where she came from, because that's the earliest point in her history where she definitely existed, given that Earth 2, which is where she was originally from, no longer exists. And some of the flashbacks and stuff we got, like she basically appears and she doesn't really remember where she came from, but she kind of feels like she has some relation to Superman. So she seeks out Superman, who is of course the John Byrne Superman, who is the only survivor of Krypton. And so she's like, "Hey, do we know each other?" And he's like, "No, I don't know who you are." And she's like, "Okay." So then she just kind of goes and does her own thing. And is, hangs out with the Justice Society, who I guess is just the first group she ran across. Firestorm, we get them. We get New Teen Titans. I forgot to mention, during this span, we also had Batman Year 2, Batman Year 3. But anyway, jumping back forth, then we had, Jason Todd has his new street kid who steals the tires off the Batmobile origin. And then this is the part that's like, I think is the most interesting. You get to the post-crisis crisis. So there was some kind of crisis that happened, and in the new history of this, new history, because the other thing, in this post-crisis history, there was a crisis, and it didn't involve parallel Earths, but like all the superheroes got together and they fought the Anti-Monitor, and probably the Monitor helped them out, and Harbinger was probably there, and Barry Allen dies. Barry Allen Flash dies. Dove dies. Aquagirl dies. Supergirl doesn't die because Supergirl doesn't exist in the John Byrne, continuity. There's no Superman and Lois from Earth 2 or Superboy Prime. And there was no Wonder Woman either, although sometimes artists would screw up and draw her like in a flashback scene. They would include her, even though she wasn't really supposed to be there. So then you get to the other side of that post-crisis, and now you get like Superman #1 from John Byrne. You get the new Flash series, Adventures of Superman. Basically all the stuff that was being published in like 1987 to 1990, whatever, that was taking place in the present, that's all after the post-crisis crisis. And then, soon after that, we have Wonder Woman show up for the first time, because, and don't get me started, this is, if I could go back and beg somebody not to do something, I would say, don't do this thing. Oh, hey, new people. Don't do this thing where you're going to start Wonder Woman now. Just do your origin, and then just have there be a gap, and, be excited about the fact that you have this gap of time that you can, stick stuff in later. But, she needs to have left the island at this around about the same time as Superman, became Superman. But that's not what they did. They said, no, Wonder Woman is starting now, 10 years in after the crisis. So then we have the Legends crossover. And then they kind of do the same thing with Hawkman that they did with Wonder Woman. They said, oh, well, the Hawk World series leads into a Hawk World full series. And they're like, no, he's coming to Earth now. Well, okay, well, then that's when they retroactively say that the Golden Age Hawkman had been the Hawkman in the old Justice League stories. And they had to keep fixing things because of this decision to have these characters start now. But that's kind of meta, in terms of just what order things happened in. So Wonder Woman shows up, Hawkman shows up, and that kind of thing. So it's not that, Barry Allen, that Wally West, starts off at the same time that Superman is starting off. It's that there's this span of time in between. Now, to be fair, the way John Byrne did it, he did kind of make it seem like his Superman #1 was taking place right after the last issue of Man of Steel. You kind of, in the long run, you understand that there had to have been some time in there, but there's a bad guy at the end of issue 6 or something like that he encounters in issue 1 or 2 or 3 or something. of Superman. So that's and some people talk about the difference between what do they remember versus what happened. And the way I've always seen it is 90% of the time, like if you were, in the post-crisis universe and you got in a time machine and you traveled backwards in time, you were still going to be in, the version of the universe that was created by the crisis. You're not going to go back and see like Supergirl in the past. Now, Peter David messed with that a little bit in the Supergirl book when he had the pre-crisis Supergirl meet the Matrix Supergirl, some things like that, but it's kind of like there's time and then there's time, and it depends on what kind of time you're dealing with. If you're talking about, time down here, then this is all just, the rewritten post-crisis-y kind of thing. But maybe you can go up here and you can see all these changes happening and that kind of thing. Anyway, the other thing that's crisis related that I wanted to talk about was I'm kind of fascinated by what they established in the miniseries New History of the DC Universe. So, because we don't get a lot of information, but apparently it suggests that there now the crisis. So now we've had some more reboots and stuff. We have Flashpoint and all Rebirth and all that. So now I'm going to call it the post-Rebirth universe. We've got a version of Crisis on Infinite Earth, a new version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is back to being, at least multiple Earths, because there's no reason not to. But the main universe, our main universe that all of characters includes the Justice Society. So instead of it being and instead of it being Earth merging at the end, they describe it as, well, there were multiple Earths, but ours was the only one that survived at the end. So it's kind of taking that same thing and looking at, well, where are we now and what can we do? What can we put back in and that kind of thing. So since we now have Supergirl again, we can have her die again. And she dies there. And then they kind of say, well, and Darkseid brings her back later, which I thought was pretty clever. Since there was the new Supergirl that came along after Infinite Crisis in the 2000s. And then shortly after her whole first arc where she's introduced, there's this storyline where Darkseid kind of takes her over and, is a bad influence. And so it's not hard to imagine, oh, well, let's just say he brought the original one back and then tell the same story from there. But this this post-rebirth crisis, in theory, it has some kind of Earth 2 on it, right? And that Earth 2, at the very least, has an older Superman. It has because we saw this in the images. It has like a grown-up Robin, like an Earth 2 Robin, and some things like that. So I think what makes sense is that in the post-rebirth world, that's where Power Girl is from. Not like some, old Earth 2, but just that Earth 2 that, was the post-rebirth Earth 2, if you will. And that's where, the older Superman, the older Lois, and you would have another Earth that would be like an Earth Prime, and that's where Superboy Prime comes from and stuff like that. So that's that. I find that kind of really interesting. But what I really am curious about, I want them to do more new history of the DC universe, like one shots, like each one outlining some part of history where they're really the things like this, where they're kind of making it up and it's really different, and and try to and get into detail on it. But anyway, so would the main Earth Zero and that Earth that the older Superman come from, do they both have roughly identical Justice Societies? Or wouldn't it be cool if that world that, that got destroyed at the end of that crisis had a justice society, but it was made up of like 1940s versions of Hal Jordan and Barry Allen and stuff. Um, and that way you would have like Superman and Barry Allen and Hal Jordan and all that together, and Batman or whatever, all together again, but older versions. So anyway, I just think that I'm fascinated by that. I hope that they get around to telling us some more about that. So let's talk about this channel. So I started this channel about a year ago. I had a little time on my hands, and I'm like, one of the things I've always tried to do with my comics is leverage them for entertainment value beyond just, reading them. Is what else can I do to sort of, have them occupy me, have some fun with them. Um, and so it occurred to me, well, you know what? Why not start a channel, and have some fun showing off my books. And so it's been an adventure. It's a bit more work than I thought it was going to be, but we're still growing. I'm up to over 350 subscribers, which I really appreciate. I recently did I'd like to get some more views on my individual, my box videos, and I'm working on that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I did an unboxing for some books that I got from Mile High Comics recently, and that's actually done really well. Don't really know why, but it's, hey, cool. And what I'm trying to do here is, I have a goal. I like to show off my books, and I want to show off my books. But it's a little bit like that thing, like, you ever seen the movie or the documentary or whatever, where you've got the musician and they just want to do their music, but the record company wants them to make a pop hit, and it's not, but they don't want to be true to themselves and blah, blah. That's kind of what I'm working on is, the comic book YouTube viewing public tends to kind of prefer looking at keys and stuff. And so my, looking at most of the issues of Darkhawk kind of videos don't necessarily, I have to find the right audience, let's just say. So trying to kind of find a balance of bringing some attention to the keys while also, showing what being true to myself and showing the things that I want to show. So, just working on, figuring out the best way to do it. It's funny, if I had done this as, hey, I just bought this collection, I don't know what's in it, let's all figure out what's in it one box at a time, I would be tearing it up. It's like, the fact that I know what I have, that's not interesting. But I recently posted box number 90. There are 180 of these normal long boxes. So we're literally like, halfway there. And I'll still do, boxes for when I get my new comics from Discount Comic Book Service, and I may start doing more, since people seem to like the Mile High, box video. I'll do that, some more of those. I have actually recorded up to box like 154. So I don't think there's any danger of not hitting 180. I'm just kind of, spacing them out. And I don't know if anybody here wants to watch, more than 2 of my videos a week. But we're gonna get all through all 180, and then I've got a digest box, and then I got to kind of figure out how to divide this up. But there's like your tabloids and your Marvel graphic novels and some things like that. So, we're going to figure out the best way to do that. And then once I get all the way through 180, I may sell out a little bit more and do, here's the top 20 keys from box 1, here's the top 20 keys from box 2, and go through it that way. And go all the way through again. So I plan on sticking to this, but that's so that's my update on the channel. The last thing I wanted to talk about, well, second to last, was how much time have I got? Oh yeah, we're doing good. We're gonna do, if you watch Family, if you watch Family Guy, it's like, this is what grinds my gears. So I use CLZ to track my collection. For those who don't know, in terms of keeping track of what you've got in your collection, there's two leaders. There's CLZ and there's League of Comic Geeks. And I've poked around at League of Comic Geeks, but I'm just so invested in CLZ at this point, I'm not gonna, change up now. And I've got the app and I've got the some things like that. But lately, they've been doing a thing that's driving me nuts, and it probably wouldn't drive anybody else nuts. But of course, I'm Mister, get all the books in order, right, and do all that. So let's look at this series here, right here. So this is Invincible. What it says on the cover is Invincible Iron Man. This is the Iron Man series from a few years ago. This is where the problem started. If you open up this book and you look at the fine print, it used to be, comic books used to put it towards the front. Now it's more towards the back. You would see that the actual title of this comic is just Iron Man. And that there's a long tradition of putting a adjective on the cover of a book when that's not really the actual title. Like X-Men said Uncanny X-Men on the front for years, and for I don't know if it's years, but for a decent amount of time before the title ever actually stopped being just X-Men and became Uncanny X-Men. But lately CLZ is going by what's on the cover. And that's kind of throwing me off because I prefer to use the real title of things, and I can change the title. That's fine. But here's the thing. Let me make my notes. This should be Iron Man Volume 7. But then the series that came out after this just said Iron Man on the cover, and that became Iron Man Volume 7. So I can't just, make this be the next Iron Man series, because then it's, it's all kind of mixed up. And they've been doing this with a few different series. So the latest Thor series, the Mortal Thor, the title is Thor. If you look in the indicia, it's just Thor. And then we've had a couple of recent ones. The Aquaman series is now titled Emperor Aquaman. Now, then these last two are a little different because they're still using the numbering from the previous series that they were part of, but still, this is Emperor Aquaman. This is not Aquaman, but they're sticking it in with Aquaman, and we have New Titans, and which is picking up the numbering from Titans, but so this is called New Titans. So I got to kind of figure it out. I think it's easier to handle when the series is over. So that might be the thing to do, is just let it roll until the series is done. And what I might do is, like with the Invincible Iron Man series, or this Iron Man series, is go back and say, this is volume 6A. So I can get it stuck in there, Iron Man volume 6A, parentheses, Invincible or something like that in my personal, CLZ, and then it'll fall into the right spot, and the fact that there's another, and that'll also handle the fact that, and then if there's another Invincible Iron Man, then there'll just be like a skip in the number, because if this were Invincible Iron Man, it would be volume 4. So there's probably going to be at some point another Invincible Iron Man series where it's actually in the part of the name, and so that would be 4. So then I would skip from 3 to 5. So I forgot to mention, semi-pertinent to all this, is I am working on my next tips and tricks video. I have had a decent amount of positive reaction to my tips and tricks video The first one I did, it's hard, man. There's lots of taking pictures, and showing, trying to show different things. So the lots of videoing little snippets of things and editing and all that. So, but I'm trying to do that when I get a little time. So hopefully I'll get that out soon. Um, Only other thing I was going to mention, in this I'll do it in 10 minutes or less, since that'll be a nice sweet hour, is sometimes people ask about insuring your collection. And the trick with insuring comics is, like, if you were like, I have my wife's engagement ring insured, right? Or her wedding set. And so basically, whatever I paid for it, that's the value. Or, the jeweler gives you a piece of paper that says this is how much this is worth, and you give that to the insurance company, and then they, you pay it. They figure out, okay, well, if this is how much you're insuring for, then you need to pay us, this much every year. And, if you have a claim, then they pay you the amount that the jeweler said that it was worth. But, there is nobody you can take comic books to, or that can come to your house and evaluate it and say, oh, this is, $150,000. So you have to kind of start off by doing that yourself. You just got to take your best guess. You got to have, reputable. I use Cover Price, and have that link up with CLZ that they offer. And I don't insure them for the full value. I don't insure all of them, let's just say, because the amount that I then have to pay to, the bigger, the more you insure for, the bigger your premium is going to be, right? And the other thing is, you can't just put it on like your homeowner, because they're just not set up for that. So there are collectibles insurance companies. There's American Collectors, which is the one that I use. And if you go to their website, it looks like they only do like classic cars, but they do comics too. And what you do is you send them your list with the values from wherever you get the values from. And they'll ask you some questions like, how are they stored? They want to know a lot about, like, are you buying and selling? So are you insuring comics that you're shipping through the mail to other people, that kind of thing? And how many people live in the house, and, just all kinds of stuff. But but ultimately, there is a dollar value that is established as the value of your collection at that moment. And then they say, okay, well, if you want to insure these comics for this much, here's how much money you're going to have to give us every year to do it. And and that's what you do. Now, here's the trick. I can never get, and this is, an American Collectors is like the second one I've dealt with. And what I liked about them is the first one I dealt with, whom I'm not going to promote, they just said, how much are they worth? They didn't ask for a list. They just said, tell us how much they're worth, and then we'll give you a premium cost. I'm like, okay. And eventually I started asking their customer service people. I'm like, so if I have a claim, how are you going to decide, if I have a claim 5 years later, how do you decide how much money, you're going to pay me? Are you just going to pay me the amount that we originally said? And they're like, well, no, our adjusters are going to, research and figure out how much that collection was worth at that time. And that's what you're going to get. And I'm like, okay, but so that means that they could be looking at a different number than you were looking at when you figured out. So basically, you could be paying too much for your premium, because they're basing the premium off of what you said the comics were worth. But then the claim, if you have to pay it off, is going to be based on what they say they were worth. So it's a little hinky. But the reason I like them, at least I like American Collectors, is they did say, yeah, you send us a spreadsheet. So it's almost like there's documentation of, like, how did we get this number? So then later, if they were like only wanting to make a claim and pay like half as much, it'd be like, well, why are you, this is the number that we agreed on. So, there's just it's more tangible. but it's still probably better than not doing it at all. Um, and you don't have to do your full collection. You can do, just your top half or whatever of your collection. You just send them the list of whatever you had. I've never done a claim, so I really don't, other than just asking questions about how it works. I've never done that, but um, that's that's a popular topic in comic book collecting, is how to go about insuring books. It's also, I think they do some extra stuff if you have like some big boy books. Like, you got some Silver Age keys and things like that, some $5,000 books. I think they get more specific pictures and things like that. But and as somebody has mentioned before, my channel it does kind of come across as insurance documentation. So I feel good if I ever have a claim, I can just send them a link, and they can validate that I did indeed have all of these comics that I said I had. So anywho, I am glad that you were here. And if you are watching this later, thank you for watching it later. I think we're going to call it to an end. We had a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 people visit, and I really appreciate everybody who visited. And like I say, I will appreciate everybody who watches it later. I appreciate all of my subscribers, and for subscribing. Please subscribe. Please comment on my videos. Please like my videos. Do whatever we can. I really want to find all of those people who are like me, who appreciate a full run of Darkhawk as much as they appreciate a single Hulk 181. You're going to see books on my channel that you're not going to see anywhere else, because most people don't bother showing them. But you're still, hey, you're seeing stuff you're not going to see anywhere else. And I do get a few variants here and there. And I used to, Discount Comic Book Service used to do a thing where if you bought all of the themed keys in a given month at like DC, you would get a even bigger discount. And so, I did the math, and it figured, even though I might be buying 1 or 2 books that I wouldn't normally buy, getting that bundle was the, a more cost efficient way of buying those comics. So that's kind of how I started buying really any variants at all. And now, Marvel, the B covers or the C covers or whatever, the ones that are not, ratio variants, it's the same price as the A cover. So I'll just figure out, if I like this artist or I like that artist. So, I do have some variants here and there, but for the most part, I like all comics. I like they don't have to be big keys for me to like them, and I'm very proud of the full run and being able to say, what, I've got 50,000. I may not have, I don't have a Hulk 181, but I've got 50,000 other books. So, and they make me very happy. So, thanks so much for being here. The box 90 went up yesterday, and it needs some love. So be sure to mark if you would, put on your schedule to go back and watch box 90. And I should have another Discount Comic Book Service unboxing in the near future as well. I think that box is currently winging its way to my house as we speak. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a good evening, and hey, have a great day.